Hi, I'm Chris Peak from the internet's Panther-Lair.com. It's been a long time. It's been a while. Maybe since we had a few morning pits last week. None on Thursday, but we had one on Friday. That great conversation with Jerry DePaula. Hopefully you check that one out right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then we haven't had morning pits up until today. I intended to have one for you yesterday. I was out of town, so we took a family trip over spring break for the kids. We were out of town Tuesday to Tuesday, intended to get back Tuesday afternoon, like 2 days ago, and record a morning pit so you'd have something to listen to and watch yesterday morning. But then American Airlines, in all of its exceptionalism, decided I should spend 6 hours in Dallas as opposed to, making my connection back to Pittsburgh. And so got back a little bit too late Tuesday night in order to record a morning pit for yesterday morning. So here we are. The Welcome Back Cotter episode is here on Thursday. So welcome back to me and welcome back to you for watching these videos here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We got a lot to catch up on, everything that went down over the course of the last week, just sort of where things stand with the transfer portal on the football side and the basketball side, and a few thoughts on a few other things that have been going on in the world of Pitt sports while I was gone, but not completely disconnected. I tried to stay a little bit disconnected, and there were some places that we were where I had no cell phone service. So let me tell you, it's incredibly freeing to have no access to the internet whatsoever so that you don't even feel tempted to take a look at what's out there. And it was nice to be able to do that and, every now and then. But then, you got to get back to the hotel, get back on the Wi-Fi and see what's going on. So a good amount of stuff happened over the course of the last week. Let's catch up on everything and see where everything stands here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com is the website. Panther-Lair.com, the Pitt sports site on the 247 Sports Network. We cover Pitt football, basketball, and recruiting. And, of course, we have message boards where you can hang out with other Pitt fans and talk about Pitt sports all day, every day. The message boards are buzzing all the time. And it's the best online community of Pitt sports fans. I think if you're a Pitt fan, you're looking to talk Pitt sports, there's different places you can go, but I think our message boards are the best place. And so if you're a Pitt fan, you're looking for a little Pitt conversation, check it out, Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, what we always ask you to do is like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We put out a lot of Pitt video content. We haven't for the last week, but we typically do. We have these daily morning Pitt shows. We have our weekly live show every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We have post-game shows and interviews and press conferences, all different things. It's all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And so if you want to make sure you don't miss any of it, subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We appreciate that and makes those numbers look nice, which always makes me happy. So after being gone for a week, just sort of keeping an eye on things from afar, what's been going on in Pitt sports? Let's start on the football transfer portal side. The number's up to 6 now, I believe. As of this recording, 6 Pitt players have gone into the transfer portal in the spring portal window. That actually closes tomorrow. Now, the thing to remember about these portal windows closing, because the basketball window closed on Tuesday, I think it was. The football window closes tomorrow. And the thing to remember about this is that the window closes, it closes for players to enter the portal, but it doesn't close for players to leave the portal. And I think that's important to keep in mind. You don't necessarily want to look at it and say, oh man, the portal window closes tomorrow. If Pitt doesn't get anybody by then, they're not going to get anybody. It just means that nobody else can go into the portal. Now, you will see names trickle in a day or two after, and since tomorrow's a Friday, it'll probably be on like Monday or Tuesday where schools have 48 hours to submit. You just have to, the player has to have his paperwork into the schools by that deadline. The schools then have like 48 hours or 2 business days or whatever it is to submit. So you might see some names pop up next week, Monday or Tuesday. But for all intents and purposes, the portal closes tomorrow, just like the basketball portal closed on Tuesday, but you still saw some names show up on Wednesday. One very interesting name in particular that we'll get to in a second. You saw it show up on like Wednesday because it might not pop up in the official transfer portal until a day later. So the portal window closed for basketball on Tuesday. It closes for football tomorrow. And as we sit here, I'm recording this on Wednesday, but as we sit here, there's 6 Pitt football players who have gone into the portal so far this spring, in the spring transfer portal window. Jake Renda, the tight end. Wide receivers, Cam Montero and Andy Jean. And then 3 offensive linemen, Adham Albaraya, Terrence Enos, and Maurice Morenzer. Some interesting names in there. One overall trend, though, and it's guys who were probably not going to start and would probably be 2-deep players at best. And each guy has a different situation. Each guy has a different role. Jake Renda wasn't going to be the starting tight end. That was going to be and will be Jake Overman. But I would have thought Renda would have a role there, whereas a guy like Abaraya, who is a redshirt freshman, is probably not going to be any better than third string this year because he's a redshirt freshman offensive lineman. So different guys are at different spots on the 2-deep. Of course, one of the most interesting names in that list of players who are transferring is Andy Jean. And you know, there's a chance that you're saying to yourself, who is Andy Jean? Remind me again. I don't remember. Well, he's the guy who transferred from Florida in December. So yeah, he transferred in December. He was on campus in January, went through spring camp and said, nah, Pitt's not for me either. Florida wasn't for me, and Pitt's not for me either. So let's try a third school in the course of 5 months. I hope those credits transfer. That's all we can really say about that is you hope those credits transfer. Good luck to Andy Jean wherever he goes. I thought he looked like an intriguing guy. I mean, obviously good speed. I think he had decent size. Not a big receiver by any stretch of the imagination. He's not a Deuce Spann. Not even really like a Kenny Johnson. But bigger than a lot of the guys that we've seen Pitt bring in. Raphael Williams and Sincere Lee and the freshmen who came in. Bryce Yates and Tony Kinsler and Cameron Sapp or even Blue Hicks, the other transfer wide receiver who came in from Louisville. Andy Jean was a little bit bigger, and so he's intriguing to me. I always kind of compared him to a Kanate Mumfield size kind of guy, and so it was always intriguing to me in that regard. But it just, for whatever reason, he felt like this wasn't going to work out for him. I don't know if I would have seen Andy Jean as a top 6 receiver for the 2025 season. I mean, I think you're looking at Johnson. And I mean, we'll just address it. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of speculation and discussion about Kenny Johnson and his future and whether he might enter the transfer portal. Until he does, we'll just assume that he's not. So we'll keep talking about him as being part of this wide receiving core for 2025, which is probably the way we should talk about everybody because tomorrow isn't promised to anyone, right? But I mean, Kenny Johnson, Raphael Williams, I think Deuce Spann put himself in the top 6 this spring. I think Blue Hicks probably did as well. So how many guys? That's 4. Johnson, Williams, Spann, Hicks. You would imagine Sincere Lee will be in there in that mix when he gets back out there healthy. He's been hurt. He got hurt late in the season last year. Pretty bad injury there. He'll be in that mix. And then, guys like Tyreek Robinson or Zion Fowler-El or even the freshmen, Tony Kinsler and Bryce Yates and Cameron Sapp were pretty good this spring. And so I think they'll be able to fill out a top 6. And I'm not sure Andy Jean was really on course to be part of that top 6. And so he probably saw that as well and said, well, if I'm not going to be a 2-deep player, then I'm going to go try and find somewhere else. And I don't mean to belabor the point here with this particular departure, but unless there was a personal conflict with a teammate or a coach or something like that, I'm not sure why you don't stick it out. You've only been on campus for 4 months, 3.5 really, when he went into the portal. You may see yourself as third team right now, but this is a team that uses a lot of receivers. They put a lot of receivers on the field at all times. They rotate receivers a decent amount. And who knows? Somebody might get hurt. You might just elevate your play and climb up the depth chart. I mean, there's a lot of ways things could change between April 15th and September 15th or April 15th and August 15th. That's a 4-month span where somebody else could transfer or, again, somebody could get hurt or you could just keep working and kind of earn your way up the chart. But it's not commonplace necessarily, but it's also not entirely unheard of for guys to do what he's doing. I mean, Anthony Johnson did it last year, right? Transferred to Illinois in January and then transferred to Pitt in April. And so it's not completely unheard of to make this quick change like this. You'd like to see guys try and stick it out, but I mean, who are we? We don't know what Andy Jean's situation is. We just know he's not here anymore. Cameron Montero, I guess sort of same perspective, not feeling like he was on the 2-deep, maybe feeling like he got passed by other guys in his class or younger guys. If he felt like Tyreek Robinson, who was also in that 2024 recruiting class, was already past him. And maybe if he felt like some of the freshmen, Bryce Yates or Tony Kinsler or Cameron Sapp, had passed him as well, that's probably one situation where, if you're looking for a real sense of where you stand and how you stack up and what your spot is, if younger players have passed you, if younger players have passed you on the depth chart, then you can probably, it's understandable to make that decision. You can probably understand. You can probably decide, like, you know what, I probably should go. Probably time to move on and find somewhere else if younger players are past you, particularly like freshmen. And I think Cameron Montero was probably behind some of those guys, and that might have been behind his decision. As for the three offensive linemen, Abaraya, Enos, and Schmoranzer, who actually committed to App State 2 days ago, I think it was on Tuesday. Schmoranzer announced his commitment. Those guys were down the depth chart, particularly Schmoranzer and Abaraya, no higher than third team. Terrence Enos is a guy who probably was going to be a top backup. He's probably, out of all 6 of the known transfers so far, is probably the one that hurts the most because he was an experienced backup. And we talked so much about the offensive line depth this year, and one of the biggest differences was going to be that they had experience in the depth, that it wasn't just maybe a solid, what they had last year, a solid starting 5 and then big question marks in the depth, a lot of inexperienced and unproven players. They were going to come into this year with a solid starting 5 and experience in the depth, that you were going to have one of Kendall Stanley or Keith Gouveia or Jeff Percy working on the second team. If that's the case, they were going to have guys like that. They were going to have Isaiah Montgomery working on the second team, or Enos working on the second team. Guys who have played were going to be, working as the reserves, which gives you depth. So inevitably, when that injury happens, you've got an experienced player who's ready to go in there. And I think Enos was going to be a pretty high service to Pitt in that role. Either at tackle or guard. Even if he wasn't in the starting lineup, he was a guy who was going to be, available to provide experienced depth, and would likely would have been called upon at some point this season, just given the way injuries tend to go with that position group. But he's also, I think he's a redshirt senior this year, and is saying, hey, I want a chance to play. I want to be on the first team. I want to be a starter. I want to go out and I want to go out and get a chance to play. And so I think yesterday, he started, he tweeted out a few MAC offers, Buffalo and Ohio, I think it was. So maybe he'll end up kind of in that area, particularly, Midwest seems good for him, a guy from Detroit. And I think he'll do well. I think he's a good player, a talented player. He got thrown into a tough situation last year, being called upon due to injuries and without any experience, and he got experience. It was on-the-job training, and that was one of the things that was going to make the offensive line stronger this year. But now it took a bit of a hit with Terrence Enos going. So we'll see who else joins those guys, those 6 transfers, by tomorrow. I would say by the end of the weekend, by Monday or Tuesday, we'll know for sure everybody who's going to go and everybody who's going to stay. And then we'll see who the coaches add. They've been bringing in visitors throughout this week. We've seen interest in defensive tackles and cornerbacks. Obviously, a big wide receiver, Hakeem Williams, came in on Monday, and that's a big one to keep an eye on. I think there's, to some extent, there are some need positions. I think they need another tight end out of the portal. I think they could use another offensive lineman out of the portal. I don't necessarily think of defensive tackle and cornerback as need positions, but if they are good players that they feel like can help them, either in the starting lineup or filling out the depth, then you go get them. If there's an opportunity to get the best player available, or somebody that you just really like and feel like could, supplement your team well, you go get them. Even if it's not necessarily a huge position of need. So we'll see what happens there. We'll kind of keep an eye on things as they develop throughout the week, but that's who they've lost so far. No big, Deion Hayes, Solomon DeShields, Jordan Addison spring portal window departure as of yet, and I'm not necessarily putting Hayes, DeShields, and Addison all in the same group, but, that big prominent name, I haven't seen that yet. We might, though. it's, that possibility is always out there. You never know until that window officially closes. So we'll see. Like I said, the basketball window did close, and that means that Pitt's remaining 3 scholarship players from last season are still on the roster, and that includes Cam Corrin, who's probably the most interesting guy among that group. I think when, I'm not going to call it the mass exodus, but when the portal window opened and Pitt players started going, particularly Jalen Lowe, and when Pitt brought in a center, and Deshaun Jackson, the Iowa State center, kind of thought that Cam Corrin might be on his way out the door. But our guy Matt Steinbring kept saying that the expectation was that Corrin was going to return, and we really couldn't figure out how that was going to work. Really couldn't figure out what that was going to look like, and we'll see. Still trying to gather some details on how this is going to work with Jackson and Corrin. Are they going to play together? Are they going to play in a rotation? I think it's going to be a little bit of both. But there it is. He's returning. Pitt basketball officially tweeted it yesterday that Cam Corrin is coming back. So, if you're looking at what this roster looks like, there's 8 scholarship players accounted for, plus a handful of walk-ons that should be returning. That'll take up about 11 out of your 15 available scholarship or 15 available roster positions, because remember, this year is going to be roster spots, not necessarily scholarship limits. And so you have room for 15 rostered players, scholarship or walk-on. And right now, Pitt's got 8 of those accounted for in scholarships. Omni Dejai, Cam Corrin, and Brandon Cummings coming back from last season. Omari Witherspoon, the freshman, coming in. And then the 4 transfers. Deshaun Jackson and Noyes Andrusaitis from Iowa State. Barry Dunning Jr. from South Alabama. And DeMarco Minor from Oregon State. We've talked a decent amount about those guys. Minor, pretty prominent one as a point guard. Andrusaitis and Dunning Jr. as wings. Jackson as a center, and then you obviously see how Brandon Cummings fits in as a guard, probably working as an off-ball guard, potentially in the starting lineup depending on who else they add, but certainly a big piece of the rotation. Probably the first guy off the bench, I would think, if this season, depending on who else they bring in. And then Corrin, figuring out that situation with him and Jackson. Does Corrin play the 4 with Jackson at the 5? Do they rotate at the 5? Like I said, I think it'll probably be a little bit of both. But it's interesting to see Cam Corrin come back. And, you'd love to know a few things. And I think we'll try to find some of these things out. Some of them are going to be, more difficult to find out than others. But you'd love to know what kind of interest he generated, how much he thought about going to the portal and considered it, and, kind of what was on the table for him. And ultimately what led him to come back to Pitt, to stay at Pitt. After the season that they had with, 3 seniors moving on, plus the transfers that they had going out, the Diaz-Graham twins and Jalen Lowe and Marlon Barnes and Papa Amadou Conti. I mean, you have, 5 transfers out there, plus the 3 seniors leaving, and Dunn and Austin and Leggett. Leggett entering his name into the transfer portal yesterday, which was interesting to see. I think it's one of those keep the options open type of situation as he tries to get an extra year of eligibility because doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter what your reason is. Just ask for one. You might get it. Who knows? It can't hurt. It's like that old thing about I go to the airport and I always ask if they've got any free upgrades available. Yeah, sure, go for it. But the worst that can happen is they say no. So if you really want to play another year of college basketball, go ask for it. Maybe you'll get it. And Ishmael Leggett seems to be giving that the old college try, so to speak. But I really thought after, with all of those guys leaving, with how last season went, and it couldn't have been a pleasant season for the players, and I think for a few of them in particular, it was probably even more unpleasant than others, like Cam Corrin, I suspect, really kind of thought he would be moving on, going somewhere else for the next year of, I think what should be his final year of eligibility, but appears he's going to come back, run it back for another year with the Pitt basketball Panthers. We'll see how that goes. So, that's mostly what happened over the course of the last week while I was gone. Transfer stuff. Guys leaving, guys not leaving, and no new transfer additions yet other than the guys that we've talked about so far, but we'll be keeping an eye on that. And, of course, we'll have lots of coverage of the transfer portal and everything Pitt's doing with the portal here at Panther-Lair.com. Well, there at Panther-Lair.com and here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, and then like and subscribe right here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We've got our mailbag coming back tomorrow, so if you want to go over to Panther-Lair.com right now, you can post your question in the mailbag thread, and we'll answer as many as we can in tomorrow's Morning Pitt. And otherwise, we'll just be keeping an eye on the portal, seeing what's going on as we get closer to that football window closing and move into the post-portal window for the basketball offseason. Well, post-portal in terms of losing players, still going to be adding guys out of the transfer portal probably into the summer is my guess. We'll see how that plays out. All right, thanks for watching today. Thanks for being patient with me while I was gone. It's good to be back, get these things rolling again. Yeah, I hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoy your Thursday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.